Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at Latin nouns again, and specifically we're going to talk about declensions. So this is a topic we've hit on before, so we're going to backtrack a little bit and just make sure that we're clear on one thing. What is a noun, right? So before you deal with declensions, you got to make sure you understand what a noun is. So we've covered this in a previous video, but it's a person, place, thing, or idea, right? That's the most basic description of a noun in English, Latin, whatever language you choose to study, right? So when we're dealing with Latin nouns, something I hit on in the other video, my students notice a lot, there's got to be a way to organize them. There are thousands and thousands of nouns in Latin, right? And if you look closely at the endings, you might notice that there's got to be a pattern, right? There's got to be a way to organize it, because otherwise there's just a lot of words, right? And luckily for us, there is. So you want to take a look at these nouns on the left, right? Do you notice anything about them? Maybe pause the video, do what you have to do, take a look. Right? You have mensa, which is a table, memoria, which is memory, aqua, negligentia, and piscina, right? So these are pretty random words: table, memory, water, carelessness, fish pond. And if you look on the right-hand side, the English translation, you'll notice that there's not any real rhyme or reason to these nouns, right? They're all spelled completely differently. They sound different. But if you look on the left in the Latin, something else is happening here. Right? And this is kind of the light bulb moment for my students when they start off learning Latin, particularly if you're in, early on in your Latin career. They're ending in the same letter. They all end in an A, right? So even though these are completely random nouns, they all are ending in A, which means there's a pattern going on here, which is big for us, right? That's really important. Try it again with this set of nouns. Here we have quibus, nuntius, oculus, paedagogus, and rusticus, right? Food, messenger, peasant, eye, tutor. Again, in English, these are completely random. But do you notice anything about the Latin? Again, look at the ending, right? Not the beginning of the word, look at the end, and you're going to have another light bulb moment. There's another pattern happening here, right? So this is really what we're after and what we're trying to understand. What's going on? Right? Why are all these nouns ending with a specific pattern, either an A or a US, right? What's happening here? And once you realize this is going on, this is, again, the big light bulb moment where you can kind of reorganize your thoughts on Latin and how it's working, right? Because there is a pattern. So here's the key idea. Even though there are thousands and thousands of Latin nouns, right? Just like any language, English, for instance, they have a similar pattern in terms of endings, right? This is a key difference. In English, there isn't really a pattern, right? You can pick, any noun around you. If you're in a classroom, you might be looking at a desk, a chair, the ceiling, a drawer, a smartboard, whatever it is. There's no rhyme or reason. In Latin, there's a pattern, and that's important. So there's actually not as much variety as you might think. The beginning of the words are pretty varied, but the endings are all the same thing, and that's important, okay? Because once you realize this pattern, you can start to organize the language and make it a lot more easier to predict, right? If you know that there's a set number of endings and there's a pattern in how they're used, you can actually predict how the word is going to be spelled. And it'll help you just become more fluent in the language and be able to read and translate easier. So when we come to Latin nouns, we put them into groups. Okay, if you want to keep it simple, just think of them as groups. If you want to be a little fancy, use their technical grammar term. They're called declensions, right? In my class, I don't care either way. For you, I would encourage you to call them groups if that makes it easier for you, just so you're not getting confused. But they are called declensions. And there's 5 of them in Latin, meaning that of all the thousands of Latin nouns, you can actually organize them into 5 specific categories or groups, which makes the language a lot easier to understand, right? So it sounds pretty easy. We're just taking thousands of nouns and we're putting them into groups. Seems easy? It is pretty easy, right? It's not overly complicated. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. So how does this all work? Well, to figure out the declension of a noun, right, in Latin, you look at its genitive singular ending, right? That might sound completely random. It's not. It's the second piece when you look up a word in the dictionary. So if you're looking up the word girl, for instance, in any Latin English dictionary, you're going to see puella, puellae, girl. The first part is the nominative singular. Puella means girl. That's the most common form of the noun. The AE, that second piece, is the genitive singular, right? So when you say of the girl, it's puellae with an AE. That's important. We'll save it for one second. The third piece is always the gender, and then you have your translation. So why are we putting this genitive singular there, right? It seems completely random. It's because it's unique. So for every declension or group, there's a unique genitive singular ending. That's the only reason, right? That's why we do it. It just means you can organize them into your groups, right? There's no overlap. So if you know what the genitive singular is, right? And again, you can find this in any dictionary or your textbook, whatever you're using. If you know what the genitive singular is, now you know the group or declension that noun belongs to. So here's the pattern. AE is what we call first declension, the first group. The long I is second declension. IS with no long mark, right? Short IS is third. A long US is fourth. And then we have EI. It's either going to be a short E or a long E with a long I, right? You see it in different ways. But that EI ending basically is fifth declension. So if you memorize these, now you have a leg up, right? Any Latin noun that a teacher can give you or anything you encounter in your Latin career, you're going to know exactly what the endings are, right? You're going to know what group it belongs to, and then you know the endings, and you can kind of predict how these words are going to be spelled. So here's some examples of it in action, right? Again, these are sort of dictionary entries of Latin nouns. So if you were to look up again, the word girl, puellae, the AE, right, makes it first declension. Amphitheater has a long I, right? And again, the ending, the gender doesn't really matter here because the groups have different genders. So like, for instance, second declension has some masculine, some neuter words. Don't worry about that. The long I is telling you it's second declension. For the word king, right, rakes, we have ragus, that IS, third declension. For the word heat, aistus, right, the US makes it fourth declension. And for the word race, meaning thing, there's a lot of ways you can translate that, but the EI makes it fifth declension. So this is what you want to get used to doing. Anytime you look up a word in the dictionary, get really quick at being able to identify the genitive singular, right? That gives you an advantage because if I know the genitive singular, I know what group my noun belongs to, and then I know the endings. And I'll show you how that all plays out in a second. Right? But that's really why I'm telling you this. Why do we care? It's about being able to predict and recognize the endings, right? That's important because in Latin, there is a ton of overlap, right? If you've looked at a noun ending chart yet, or even just been reading the language, you'll notice that AE can mean a few things, for instance, right? It could be a genitive singular, a nominative plural. It's kind of all over the place. It's a common ending. So how do you know what you're looking at? Well, if you organize the language like this with declensions and being able to kind of recognize what group a noun belongs to, it helps you predict the language. It just makes it easier. This is what I mean, the dreaded noun ending chart, right? Every Latin student looks at this and they get overwhelmed. If you're using kind of a more grammar-heavy approach, you've probably seen this before. If you're not, maybe you haven't. But this is how we organize the language, right? These are the endings for all 5 declensions. So they're in columns, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, okay? And some of them are split because you have neuter involved, which is totally fine. But if I know that my noun is a first declension noun, right? In other words, the genitive singular is an AE. And I'd encourage you real quick to look at the genitive singular. Go left to right. You'll see that it's unique across the different declensions, right? AE, long I, IS, US, EI. This is why we use it. But if I know my noun is first declension, I could ignore 80% of the chart, right? 4 of the 5 declensions I can pretend are not there. I don't need them. Now I know that the endings that word uses, for instance, puella, I know it's using the endings I, right? That's what it has to be using. There's no overlap, no confusion. There might still be confusion, let's be honest, but at least I'm not dealing with 5 declensions and trying to figure out which of these noun endings to use. Same thing, if I recognize that my noun is fourth declension, right? Now I can use the endings us, ui, u, right? And that helps because look at fourth declension and look at second declension. The nominative singular is a US in both. That's extremely confusing. But if I know the genitive singular and I know what declension my noun belongs to, now I can recognize and say, okay, got it. This noun is fourth declension. I'm ignoring everything else, right? Because fourth and fifth do have different endings when you go down the line. It just helps you figure out what endings to use, how the word is going to be spelled, and just organize the language again so that you're not getting confused. So I'd encourage you to think of it that way. Knowing the declensions is just a way of organizing Latin nouns. That's all it really is. So let's just do a quick recap, right? Trying to keep the video short. For declensions, Latin nouns have a pattern, right? Their endings have a pattern. That's the whole idea. We can organize them into groups that we call declensions based on this pattern. The declensions are based on the genitive singular ending. So if you know the genitive singular, you know what declension or group your noun belongs to. This helps us know which endings to use, right? It helps you predict how the word is going to be spelled and avoid any confusion because there is overlap. We just saw it on the chart, right? So knowing the group or declension helps you avoid that confusion. And at the end of the day, it's just about organizing the language. That's really all we're doing here. We're trying to take a lot of Latin nouns and put them into nice little groups. That's a big benefit of Latin. It's something you can't do in English, but we can do in Latin, right? So if you get good at this and you practice this, you're going to see the language just becomes a lot easier for you. So I'd encourage you to take this video, apply it to class. Just think about this as you go. Whenever you see Latin noun, you need to know what declension it's in.